All right, welcome back to another edition of Between the Lines, fueled by Gatorade. I hope you guys had a Merry Christmas. I'm joined by Ben Leber and Pete Bercich, and today we break down the Vikings' 52-33 loss to the New Orleans Saints on Christmas Day. And Ben, I don't think we have to go any further than Alvin Kamara's performance: 22 carries, 155 yards, NFL record 6 touchdowns, which ultimately led to the Vikings giving up the most total yards in franchise history. But I'm not going to rub too much salt on the room today. We've had about 3 or 4 days to assess this loss. So what are some things that stood out to you regarding that game?
Well, I think it really was just a failure by the whole defense. I would love to look at the defensive line and say, look, guys, you got pushed around a little bit. They recreated the line of scrimmage too often. You weren't getting off blocks. Linebackers, same sort of thing. Couldn't find the lanes to shoot and cause some penetration. And I wish I could just look at just the front seven, but it really was the whole defense. And as Pete often likes to say, that it's never just one guy on one particular play. Sometimes it's one guy there and another guy here, another position here, another group of guys over here. And so collectively it was just a failure by our whole run defense. And so it was unfortunate. I did not expect them to run the football as well. I thought we'd have better success with that. So it was, obviously very disappointing. And, historically, it was one of the worst performances we've ever seen.
Yeah, 264 rushing yards. The New Orleans Saints had 264 rushing yards. Alvin Kamara averaged 7 yards per carry. But you guys both played linebacker. And, Pete, I want to talk about the linebacker group. 4 starting linebackers did not play. Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks, not Hardy Nickerson played. But when you think about a guy like Hardy Nickerson and Blake Lynch, those two linebackers that played and had to step up in the moment, how would you grade their performances with this defense being so depleted?
Well, it's a matter of if you want to quantify it or grade on a curve, if you will. I mean, overall, not very good, just judging by the results, because, it's a results-oriented game. You got to, either win or you lose, either you stop your opponent or you don't. The problem, though, is when you have such new guys in the huddle, new guy calling plays, the defensive line in front of you, you're not in sync. You don't exactly know where you're going, and New Orleans just throws a little bit of wrinkle at you with the tight end maybe bending himself back into the box, and where do you go? Does it change your fits? And that's the thing. It's so hard to judge if it's schematic, because as a coach, you don't want to ask your players to do more than they can do, and if that's physical or mental, it's either or. But when the defensive lineman doesn't quite get the penetration you need, and then the linebacker doesn't quite get to the gap that he needs, and these things just add up exponentially. So, from a schematic standpoint, I think they did what they possibly could, everything they possibly could. Extra guys in the box doing what they can to slow down Kamara. But unfortunately, it was just that chain reaction. I thought the group, they had an opportunity. It would have been great to see Eric Wilson intercept that third pass. That would have been huge for the group. But overall, I think they did the best that they possibly could in a really bad situation. But, that's life. And don't tell me how rough the waters are. Just bring the ship in, right?
Just bring the ship in, and you gotta talk about this offensive side of the ball, Ben. Kirk Cousins, 27 of 41, 291 yards, 3 touchdowns. When you score 33 points, you would expect to win. But, I would just say it just wasn't enough to win the game, even though it wasn't a terrible performance by Kirk Cousins in this offense.
No, it really wasn't. And that's the thing. I walked away from this game feeling kind of similar how I've walked away from a few of the other losses is, man, it's really hard to look at the offense and say, hey, you guys were responsible for this. They scored 33 points against a really good defense on the road in their place, which I get there's no fans, but it's still a tough environment, Christmas Day, all those things. I just think that, yes, they are going to make some plays because, again, they are a really good defense. But we still overcame those things. Was it perfect? No, it wasn't perfect. But they did enough to win the game. I thought Kirk was he played really well. Obviously there's some times where, I think that he should throw the ball away at times and have that internal clock go a little bit faster. But those are, unfortunately, some mistakes I think we keep seeing pop up from game to game. But was it one of those game-killing things? I don't think so personally. So overall, I think the offense, they did enough to win, and unfortunately, this loss is really more on the defense.
For sure. I think, Pete, when you look at the constant of the past 3 weeks with teams stacking the box and then trying to shut down Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson, one positive that stood out. Let me get that word out. That stood out is this tight end position group. You got Irv Smith Jr., Tyler Conklin, 4 touchdowns in the last 3 games. How impressed have you been with that position group?
I've been very impressed with the group, and one of the things that I've kept in mind and have talked to coaches and other people around the league, it's that tight end position takes a while to develop. It may take 2 full seasons for these guys. And so why is that? Well, in the running game, the tight end is part of the running schematic, right? So that means you need to know all the fundamentals. You need to know all the blocking schemes. And, oh, by the way, the tight end's the guy that they move around and try to do different things with. So you're almost never in the same position twice on a specific run. Then they have to know the passing game, right? So they have to know all the fundamentals of a wide receiver. You got to catch everything thrown your way. It's a very difficult position to master. We very rarely see a rookie tight end come in the league and tear things up. It's kind of a crescendo, as these guys get better and better. And I think between Conklin and Irv Smith Jr., you have a pretty good duo. And, Conklin he's a very multifaceted tight end. He can block. He can obviously catch, and he's shown some good juice after the reception. So Irv Smith Jr., we know what he's all about. He's about big body on a safety. He's going to make that catch. And there were a lot more of those kinds of throws against New Orleans. So all that combined gives me a lot of hope for that position.
And to add on to that, Pete, and just how much that tight end position has changed. I mean, that you think about just a generation ago, and most of the tight ends were inline guys next to the offensive tackles. And yes, they might have 3, maybe 4 pass routes that they have to learn just from that inline position. But now these guys, you look at Conklin, he's a fullback sometimes. He's a guy on the move. He lines up next to the tackle, and then he lines up out in space as a slot receiver. So now they have to understand all the slot receiver mechanics. So to add into everything that Pete was just saying, it's a really difficult position, especially in the new generation, in the new era of tight ends.
Yeah, I think those are definitely a position group that will be the future is very bright for that position group. And moving forward, we're going to need a lot of positives, especially with a lot of these young guys in the picture. But the Detroit Lions are up next. The playoffs are out of the picture. So, Pete, what do you need to see going forward in this Lions game?
Well, what you think you need to see is you definitely have to clear up the mental mistakes, the alignment mistakes. That's something that got to us against Chicago, and we saw some of that again a week ago, a couple days ago against the Saints. These guys are, we're playing for a position on this team for next year. Whether or not they're going to get re-signed, whether or not they're going to come back to camp. It's kind of, again, like a last preseason game on steroids, if you will. So these guys all have to go out there, prove that they belong on this team, because when you're below 500 and you hit that off season, it's not if changes are going to happen, it's when they're going to happen, and who is going to maintain their position in that room, in that meeting room, and keep that, and then get an opportunity again next year to play in those same positions. So for even all these young guys, the guys that only been in for a week or two, if they show enough, potential, they might have themselves a spot for next year. So no better way to judge talent, no better way to judge young talent than putting them on the field, letting them play this game, letting them battle it out and see how they do.
A last preseason game on steroids, Ben. With the preseason game, you're not going to see many starters. So what do you need to see from this Vikings group this last game?
Well, again, to Pete's point, I think it is going to be like a 4th preseason game. And when you look at how you organize and put together a 4th preseason game, it's very simple, very vanilla. Don't overload these guys with a whole bunch of schematic things and have a big, thick playbook. They need to go into this last game of the season, whoever's going to be on the field, simplify the offense and defensive game plan, because we want to see guys fly around. No more of these guys on defense looking around and saying, like, are we in 2? Are we in 2-man? The ball's about ready to snap. I'm not covering the right guy. You got Harrison over here directing traffic, trying to get guys lined up. No more of that. Last game of the season, get lined up, play simple football, because I want to see who's fast. I want to see who has the football instincts. So when you put it all together, if you have a normal spring, then you get into the regular season next year in 2021, and you can play fast even with a bigger repertoire of plays. So I want to see simplistic football and fast football.
Simplistic football, fast football. Guys, thank you again for tuning into another edition of Between the Lines. Happy New Year. Happy holidays. Stay safe, stay healthy. For Pete Bercich, Ben Leber, I'm Gabe Henderson. Have a good night.